Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Property Finance Podcast. So today I'm carrying on my little AI interview, understanding the development finance process. So got my phone at the ready again. So part two of this little interview. So part one was all around kind of understanding the process. And so now part two is going to be about understanding finance products. So this is more of an understanding of the products as opposed to the process. So the first little section of questions, it's asked about product options. So the first question is, what types of development finance products are available? So there are probably three of the three main ones. So you have senior debt, stretch senior debt, and mezzanine finance. So when it comes to development finance, senior debt is kind of what everyone knows and loves, the 65% loan to GDV up to 85, 90% loan to cost, first charge, and it's offered by every single development lender. Then when you look at stretch senior debt, this is pushing your leverage to 70% loan to GDV, for example, maybe pushing up to 90, 95% loan to cost, albeit most cap at 90% loan to cost. And again, first charge development finance offered by few and far between of development finance lenders. And then mezzanine finance is second charge development finance that comes in and again pushes that leverage up just that little bit higher, pushes you up to 75% loan to GDV and potentially again up to 90, 95% loan to cost. They're kind of the three main development finance products that we see. That tends to be on the kind of new build commercial conversion side. If you then look at refurb loans, obviously you have your standard refurb loan, which is normally 75% day one and then 100% of the refurb costs. You might have a refurb bridge where potentially you're looking at 75% day one and then kind of self-funding the build costs. And then you might have just a straightforward bridging loan, for example, if you wanted to go down that route, which is just an acquisition, no underwriting of any of the refurb or development or anything like that. And they just literally lend against what the property's worth now. So there's a few different products, but I would say if you're looking at new build development finance or commercial conversions, they're kind of the three products that you want to be aware of, which is senior debt, stretch senior debt, and mezzanine finance. And the second question that AI has asked into this bit is, how do these products differ in terms of cost, terms, and flexibility? So in terms of cost, I mean, actually, they go up in increments. So senior debt is kind of your cheapest. That tends to be anywhere from 8 to 12% per annum. Stretch senior debt is anywhere from probably 9 to 15%. And then mezzanine finance is anywhere from kind of 12, 13% all the way up to 18, 20, 25%, whatever you're sort of paying on that second charge stuff. Almost in line with kind of investor finance as well. And then in terms of flexibility, again, it kind of goes up in increments, with senior debt being kind of the most flexible, stretch senior debt being a little less flexible, and then mezzanine finance being relatively unflexible in terms of what they can kind of get away with. Again, with it being second charge finance or mezzanine, it tends to be relatively stuck in what they can offer. And then in terms of terms, again, senior debt tends to be anywhere from kind of 12 to 18, 24 months. Stretch senior debt, again, very similar. And mezzanine finance, again, very similar. They'll all work to kind of the same metrics in terms of timings. Then the next section that AI has asked is around loan terms. So this question is, what is the typical interest rate range for development finance? Well, I've literally just answered that. So senior debt, again, hopefully I don't say completely different numbers here, but anywhere from kind of 8 to 12%, and then stretch senior debt is going to be anywhere from kind of 11, 12 upwards. And then mezzanine finance, again, anywhere from kind of 12, 14, 15, all the way up to the mid-20s. Hopefully I haven't said completely different numbers there, but we will see. I'm sure someone will let me know if I have. Then the next question is, are there any additional fees I should be aware of, such as arrangement, exit, or valuation fees? There's actually one missing off here as well, which is quantity surveyor fees and legal fees as well, which I think realistically need to be kind of raised because they are a significant additional cost. So in terms of fees, normally you're looking at kind of a 2% arrangement fee, which is standard across any products at the moment, whether it be buy-to-let, bridging, whatever, development finance, refurb loans, all tend to be around the kind of 2% arrangement mark, albeit buy-to-lets maybe slightly more at the moment. In terms of your exit fees, anywhere between 0 and 1% is kind of industry standard, and that's off the loan amount rather than the GDV. The valuation fees, this is really, really difficult to put a metric on this because each development deal is going to be completely different. You might be building 200 units, you might be building 2 units. The valuation fee is going to vary massively. But I would say as a rule of thumb, if you budget circa £750 a unit, I think you'll be there or thereabouts. You could possibly drop that down to £500, but I think 750 gives you a good baseline to kind of work off of. And same with legal fees as well. I think if you budget maybe £750 to £1,000 per unit, I think on the smaller stuff that tends to be where you're going to be. When you get into the bigger units, it really is difficult to say. I would say anywhere up to maybe 10, 15 units, you're probably looking at 5, 6, 7, 8 grand. When you get into the 200 units, you could be talking 20, 30 grand of legal fees potentially. It really does vary massively. And then quantity surveyor fees, again, I think if you budget sort of circa 500 to 750 per unit, then I think you're there or thereabouts. And again, similarly to valuation fees, valuation and QS tends to cap out at kind of circa 3, 4, 5 grand, depending on size. Then in terms of the next question, it's asked, what is the usual maximum term for development finance loans? Kind of touched on this briefly previously, which is most will go 12 to 18 months. In terms of maximum, the maximum we've seen is kind of 2 years. If it's phased, you could see that extend significantly. So, for example, we've got one at the moment where the client's building 180 odd houses. That's going to be a 2, 3, 4 year term. So it's going to progressively get longer, obviously, as they go through the phases. They may not need development finance for the whole amount of that, because obviously as sales go through, they're going to become self-funded. But I would say 2 years is kind of the maximum to sit on any one facility. And then the last little section for this one that AI has kind of covered is flexibility and features. So I think these are going to be 2 rather interesting questions, hopefully. So the first one is, are there any flexible options for funding smaller phases of a project or multiple projects simultaneously? So I'm going to kind of cover the second bit first, which is multiple projects at the same time. So we have a number of developers who will have 2, 3, 4 projects on the go at any one time. I think the thing to keep in mind is that lenders want to understand how you're going to be able to go through all of those deals at the same time. Do you have the manpower to be able to get through? Do you have a good enough professional team to be able to deal with multiple projects at the same time? And that's all they're bothered about really, is can you deliver those projects and can you do it within the budget, the time frame, everything else? So in terms of flexibility, there doesn't need to be any flexibility of product. I think it is just a case of taking obviously a development loan for each one. Again, it's worth kind of dealing with an accountant to understand, do you want to try and put all of your developments with one development lender? Not something I would recommend, but within your accountancy structure, that may be the best way to go. I would always recommend kind of having a few different companies. So if you've got 3 projects on the go, I'd probably have 3 limited companies and I'd have 1 lender per limited company. However, building a bit of a relationship may be beneficial as well. In terms of funding smaller phases, this question is kind of ambiguous, as AI normally is. I believe what this is trying to push at is the ability to kind of fund, maybe if you've got, 20 houses on one development and you want to do maybe 5, 5, 5, 5 and do it over 4 phases, that is potentially an option. What I would say with that is, what you tend to find, and with this one I mentioned a second ago with 188 houses, the first phase we've done is 45 houses. That was kind of the sweet spot for where we could get the finance to work. What you will find with maybe 20 units is if you do development finance for 5, your purchase cost of that site, where you're trying to kind of borrow against the GDV, you can only borrow against the GDV of the phase you're doing. So you can only borrow against the phase of the 5. The problem you're going to find is potentially not being able to draw enough day one to cover the purchase price. The residual value of that land can be added to the GDV, but that's probably a whole other episode on its own, kind of talking about how that could work. So there are ways of doing it. We have done it where on that 188, we've funded 45 to begin with. But I think when you get into smaller sites, sometimes it's easier just to do development finance on the full 20 rather than trying to split it into a few phases. However, if you're an inexperienced developer, you may need to think about phases. And then the last question under this one, under flexibility, is can finance products accommodate unexpected costs or changes in the project scope? So we've actually got one at the minute, which it hasn't had an unexpected cost, but it has had a change in kind of the scope of the project, in that what's happened is a barn conversion. Development finance went through, no problem whatsoever. And the clients have now gone for planning permission and have put extensions on each of the units. What will happen is hopefully we'll be able to go back to the development finance lender. We'll be able to say, right, look, based on this new planning permission, the GDV's gone up by, I think it's £300,000 on this one, possibly 400. And the build costs actually haven't gone up that much. So for these extensions, I think it's 20, 30 grand per extension, and the GDV's gone up sort of £100,000 per extension. So it's a significant increase. What we're hoping is that the development finance lender will look at that and say, yeah, of course, let's bump up the finance by, let's say, circa 100 grand to allow for these 3 extensions, or possibly even bump it up a bit more. And that will then accommodate that change in the project. And we have it happen quite a bit where people, we've got it on another site actually thinking about it at the moment, 3 new build houses. What's happening is they're going in for amended planning because there's a barn on the site as well. So they're going to go in for amended planning to convert the barn into 2 dwellings as well. Again, that will then form part of the development finance, which then will hopefully increase the facility that comes through on the development finance, and will then hopefully allow them to either pull out some equity or just cover the full build costs of the additional project. Then in terms of unexpected costs, there's a couple of options here as well, because we've had one recently where they went through development finance, everything was great, and actually the GDV increased while they were going through the build. So they were in the very privileged and fortunate position that actually the GDV had gone up enough throughout the process to actually then accommodate the increased build costs. So the build costs had gone up a small amount, not anything significant, but the development lender was able to just look at it and go, well, actually, based on 65% loan to GDV, which is what we were at the start, we can accommodate that within that because the GDV has gone up. And that was just through natural kind of market changes, market increases. The couple of options that you've got in terms of unexpected costs are either going back to your original development finance lender. So, for example, they might be able to do what we just discussed and be able to increase that facility. You may have to go through the developer exit route, which then takes you from being at 65% loan to GDV up to 75% loan to GDV. Again, should accommodate any increases. Or potentially, you've got the option of bringing in mezzanine finance on a second charge or a private investor on a second charge, which again, if you go down the mezzanine finance route, pushes you up to 75% loan to GDV. Yeah, so that brings the second part to quite a nice close. And in the next part, we're going to talk about the last part, which is kind of market insights and recommendations. So hopefully you're enjoying this AI interview so far and kind of getting a few nuggets. I know that kind of reading through, I've been really surprised at the quality of the questions that have come through. And actually, I've been quite surprised at the accuracy of these questions and how they really do seem to match up with questions that we get asked every day. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you have, please do let me know, because it would be great to kind of do one on bridging maybe, and maybe one on mortgages as well, to kind of cover those bases off as well. But thank you very much for listening. Catch you on the next one.